All right, we are live on air, so thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. This is our first ever Google Hangout on air. We are here with center directors from all over the country, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but what I'd like to do is have them describe a little bit about their school and the center and how the center fits into the culture and the mission of their school, and as well as talk a little bit about how their center came to be. So I will start with Betsy because you are on the left-hand side of my screen at the bottom, and so if Betsy, you would introduce yourself. We'll introduce ourselves, say where you're from, how long you've been at your school, what school you're in, and then after that we can go into each of us talking about our programs, if that works.
Okay, great. So my name is Betsy Flynn. I am the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Renbrook School in West Hartford, Connecticut. Our school is 3-year-olds through 9th grade. It's a co-ed day school. And I have been at Renbrook for many years. I was a lower school teacher, kindergarten, 3rd, 4th, 5th, for many years before becoming director of the center.
Great. And so, Colleen, you're next in my lineup. So, if Colleen, if you would introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure. My name is Colleen Worrell, and I am the director of the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning at St. Mark's School in Southborough, Massachusetts. I have been at the school for a total of about 32 days, so I'm brand new. And what's exciting and fun is I'm brand new to independent schools and brand new, and then another layer of boarding schools. So St. Mark's is a small boarding school, co-ed. It's a secondary school, and there's just under 380 students. And the center has been around this is the 3rd year of the center. So we'll talk a little bit more about that after we make introductions.
Great. Hi, I see Jim just joined us. So hi, Jim. How are you?
How are you doing? Fine, thanks.
Great. We are going around and introducing ourselves just first, and then we'll talk about our centers in a moment. So, Jim, since I addressed you, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know where you're from and how long you've been at school and all those good nuggets of information.
Sure. Jim Ballengee. I'm the director of the Center for Public Purpose at Penn Charter, which is a 326-year-old this year Friends School in Philadelphia. The center's been up and running. This will be the 3rd year coming up. And in addition to that, I also teach a variety of service learning courses related to the center: poverty, peace, justice, social change, urban issues, that type of thing. And I've been teaching all together. This will be my 42nd year coming up.
Excellent. And finally, Stacey, last but not least, from our West Coast joiner. Stacey, will you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Stacey Kertsman. I'm the director for the Center of Awareness, Compassion, and Engagement. So that's the acronym ACE. At Castilleja School, we're a 6 through 12 all-girls school. We're 105 years old, I think, maybe 106 after. And sort of really focused on developing women's leadership. And prior to being at St. Mark's, I taught and was an administrator prior to being at St. Mark's. Prior to being at Castilleja, I was at formerly St. Mark's School, now Mark Day School, a K-8 school, working on social emotional learning programs, and I was a teacher and administrator there. So sort of worked in the K-12 spectrum, but now focused on 6-12.
Great. Not to be confused with St. Mark's in Massachusetts.
That's right. This is Mark Day School, Marin County, California, probably very different from St. Mark's in Massachusetts.
Okay, so I am very excited because I think all of your centers are different, but all sort of encompass large parts of the same concept. So I'm very excited to hear, and I'm sure the other people watching this are also excited to hear about what is different and what are the similarities that are that go on at your in your centers. So I'm going to go back to Betsy and have her talk a little bit about her center and how it fits into her school and how it all sort of works.
Okay, great. And I just a side note, I noticed that we're going into our third year, as a couple of these other centers are. We started the center several years ago after the stock market crash in 2008. We were experiencing some lean times at our school, as I know a lot of schools were, and some of the budgets were cut at our school, including our professional development budget. So we, at that time, got a new head of school, and he led a strategic plan for the school. We had a head who was here for 20 years. So when he came, he led a strategic plan, and out of that strategic plan, one of the tenets of it was a creation for a center for teaching and learning. So one of my colleagues and I started doing some research around that, and at the time there weren't a lot of centers, and so we looked for models of centers that we would like to follow. And one of the first centers that we came across was the Martin Institute for Teaching Excellence in Memphis. And we got in touch with Jamie Baker, who was then the director, and spoke to her about what their center was like. They were aligned with Presbyterian Day School. And then we also spoke to Bo Adams, who was with at Mount Vernon Presbyterian School in Atlanta, and they had a Center for Innovation. So we gathered a lot of information about different centers that existed. A lot of the centers at that time were mostly for secondary schools, so ours was going to be a little different in that we were more of a junior school. And so we gathered our information and research, and we presented it to our head, who gave us the approval to present to our current board chair, at the time, our board chair, and some key board members. And through that whole process, eventually there was a way clear to start the center. We originally had hoped that the center would be independent from the school, and it may be someday, but right now it is part of the school. And the mission is really to support teachers in their professional growth and to provide resources and programs for teachers to help in their quest to stay current in this rapidly changing and exciting world of education. And the other part is to host national educational thought leaders on campus and to provide a forum for our teachers as well as the local public and private school teachers as well. And so we hosted the first year. We had John Hunter come from the Martin Institute, which was fabulous. And we've had Will Richardson. We brought some people from California to talk about design thinking. We had Grant Lichtman last fall. And we've hosted these for free for area public and private school teachers. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about were the challenges, and for us, the biggest challenge I would have to say is the leadership transition that we've incurred in the last several years. The headmaster at the time that we created the center is no longer here. So we had an interim head last year, and now we have a new head this year. So when you start something brand new like this, and you have a mission based on that head at the time, and because we have been in a leadership transition, not only the head of school, but division heads as well, it's hard to keep on the same path that we had intended for the center, but we're hanging in there, and it's been very welcomed by most faculty, and I feel like we're just getting underway, and we have a lot more that we can do with this. And then I guess one of the questions was what advice you would give to someone who's starting a center, and I would say to do similar to what we did, is to research, and there are more and more centers cropping up, and find the one that suits you or fits your community the best, because as you will hear from today, there are just several different kinds of centers out there. And one of the best things that I did was, in the first year, found some colleagues from around the country who are doing similar work to mine, and we formed a group, and we have a monthly Google Hangout, like what we're doing today. And that has been so great for help with resources and sharing frustrations and advice, and so I would highly recommend that. It's been a real godsend, because there aren't many of us doing this. There are more and more, but it's just great to have some partners in crime. So I think I'll turn it over to someone else.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Betsy. Colleen, are you ready to tell us what you have? I mean, I'm imagining, since you're so new, it's more what you're intending. But anyway, I'm interested to hear how it's going.
Okay. Yes. So it's going to be a combination of what I've learned so far and where I hope it's going to go, I guess. So I think there's some interesting overlaps with Betsy's process in terms of where the center came from, and it actually came from a whole sort of St. Mark's community dive into a new strategic plan. So in 2010, the school community came together to devise a new strategic plan that is so ambitious that it's called St. Mark's 2020, because it's going to take about 10 years to actually implement the whole process. And in this strategic plan, they were very thoughtful about attending to the core mission and core values of the school. This is our 150th year. But also recognizing the fact that we have to prepare our students for the future. And so one of the sort of centerpieces of the strategic plan was the center. And it's fun. My office in the center has a lot of tours go through, and it's kind of high time for admission season. So I get to hear a lot of interpretations of the center, and one common theme is that the center is both the physical but also metaphysical sort of hub of the school, and so it's actually right in the center of St. Mark's, and it serves a few different functions. But the main, I think similar to Betsy's, there's kind of three pillars, I guess, that upholds the center. And the first is student enrichment and student support. And St. Mark's was very deliberate about thinking about the fact that all students need support, and we don't want to push that out into the margins. And it could be some sort of academic support that's very specific to their needs, but it also could be different, having students be more aware of different learning styles, different habits of mind. And so that's one of the key things, as well as enrichment. So internships, grants for student independent learning, thinking about ways to something that I'm really interested in, even capturing, independent learning, having that combined with things like MOOCs, the movement out there of massive online courses that have really fascinating, I think, potential in secondary education. So there's the student enrichment component, including really trying to connect students to careers and ideas about their future. So that's one, student support and enrichment. The second is faculty development and professional learning. And one thing I really loved, one of the things that attracted me here, was St. Mark's is truly 110% committed to developing talent, and that's something that is basically one of the core functions of my job and the core functions of the center. And then the final pillar for the center is educational research and collaboration, sort of, and that outreach and research component combined is something that also was really attractive for me, someone new coming in. So those are the three areas, and it's interesting that there's a lot of programs that are starting year 3. I think that a lot of independent schools, as I've been researching, are grappling with this term innovation. We hear it all the time, and what does it mean? What does it mean to us? And I really do think that St. Mark's bringing teacher and professional learning into the same physical space is really a brilliant move, because what we're all, I think, trying to do is really more be partners with our learners and to learn together, to co-learn and to co-create learning experiences and classes. And so that's one of, I think, the great physical, sort of symbolism of the space that hopefully that will translate more into day-to-day practices. But there's also, there's a lot of kind of theory and vision around it, but really in terms of day-to-day, the center is also a center for a physical space where kids hang out and meet, and they do homework together, collaborate on things, just have fun. There's a room where kids can just go, it's whiteboard walls. They can just go and create and dream. And somebody told me about how someone preparing for some assessment, someone put their whole advanced coursework on the whiteboard, and then everyone started coming in and studying from it and with each other. So it's a collaborative space for student learning that is just open to them to make what they want of it. And it's really a space also that is helping us think deeply about learning and teaching, and helping us to open our doors to each other within the campus, but also open doors to other teachers and educational experts outside of our campus. So it's the start of year 3, and I'm really excited to work with teachers here as well as students to dream up great ways of teaching and learning, drawing on past proven methods, but also integrating some of the new stuff. I don't think innovation is all new. I think we've had great educational practices that we can build on, but also new ones that are out there for us to discover. And so I think that's sort of the mission that I'm taking into this position, and also the notion that we are flexible and learning as we go, and responding to not only teacher needs, but also student needs, and things we learned from community partnerships and all of you folks.
Perfect. Thank you, Colleen.
Sure.
Jim, are you ready to talk about your center at Penn Charter?
Sure, definitely.
Okay, great.
All right, I would say we do also have a Center for Teaching and Learning, I would add. Though it is in a separate office, we do collaborate a lot together, and by collaborating, we've been able to establish some relationships locally with colleges that have really helped us. Our Center for Public Purpose at Penn Charter really came out of what we've done historically, as we sort of moved from community service to service learning and into public purpose. We were looking for a way to kind of amplify the work we've already done to date. So we set this up after a pretty massive summer retreat in 2013, in which we got parents, students, community stakeholders, a whole variety of people together, and pretty much laid out a 1-, 3-, and 5-year plan for the center. And what we focus on really is what we think are, as a Quaker school, the most pressing social issues in Philadelphia, which is education, food insecurity, and poverty. And one strange advantage of that is, I'm sure you all have, I get all the time, any number of well-meaning people who come in and say, my daughter or my son or I am following this cause, and we think Penn Charter should drop everything and start working on X. And now we can at least say to people, well, that's great, and we might want to help, but these are 3 clear areas that we are concerned about, and the center concentrates on. So that saved me a lot of time over the years, last few years. We do operate as part of the school. We're talking about a satellite center off campus this summer, but we are part of the school and have raised funds through a capital campaign for the center. We also got an EE Ford grant that we have to match 2 to 1. But we haven't spent any of that money yet, but we have raised funds for the operation of the center. And the point's going to come where we're actually going to hire an executive director and an assistant. At the moment, I still teach a lot. I do all coordinate the service program for the high school. So we really need somebody who concentrates on this work solely at this point. Again, our mission is pretty clear in that we're really trying to engage our students in service and community-based work by addressing the major issues in the city of Philadelphia. We do have one advantage in the sense, I think, that we are, as I said, 326 years old. We were the first school in Philadelphia. So I know when I've gone down and testified before the School Reform Commission or other groups, I can say we at least think we have a right to address these issues because we were here before any public or private schools were around, and we've been talking about and working on these issues in some vein since that time, which gives us a little more legitimacy, I think, as well. I'm trying to go through the questions here. The biggest challenges probably, for instance, we really have stuck with the idea of working with neighborhood public schools. The Philadelphia school system is in turmoil and has been for decades, and we've been very clear that we want to work with various public schools, not charter schools. Yet, over time, we found, for instance, we worked with some sustainable developers this summer to maybe put a center, an outgrowth of the center, in a school, and they're rehabbing a charter school. So sometimes we have to drop some of our moral stances and just say, where can we serve the most people in the community the most effectively, and not get too involved in political discussions or anything else. What that leads to sometimes is we have brought in some speakers that are fairly controversial on these topics, and not always gotten the best response from a few of our parents. That can be in the current admission scene a kind of nervy thing to do, but we really feel that's important to get the kids involved. I'll give you one example. When I say amplify, I'm just thinking of a student who's the clerk of our service council who is going to come in and talk to me about some essays she's writing for college and a service program. But she's writing about a philanthropy course she took here and a grant she wrote for a playground and got from a foundation, and also a coding program she's going to take into another school we helped start up below us in the last few years. In the past, I think 10 years ago, she would have written about going to the soup kitchen and the number of people she served and maybe tutoring, etc. So when I say amplify, we don't do that with all our kids, but I think that's the kind of result we see that's really gratifying when we see that. So in terms of challenges, too, again, I mentioned the people who want us to be all things to all people and do everything as well. We hope that we're getting into the areas we promised out of that retreat. We've got very clear goals for what we wanted to do. I worry at times. I think performing arts, we've done a great job. I don't think with athletics we've done a very good job. So in terms of not being balkanized and sitting in your own little center, I think there's some parts of the school we haven't reached out to enough yet. And probably we tried for the first time this summer to really address some metrics and systems of measurement. We had an outside person come in and evaluate 4 of the programs we've been running to see if that we really are effective. Are we really doing what we say we do, or are we talking about these nice things in a PR sense and not accomplishing that? And then I would agree with Betsy as well in terms of what really helps me the most. It really is talking to those partners in crime. I had a discussion today with another public purpose center director in New York about could we put together a public purpose resume for kids that they could prepare as they went through the school, even pre-K through 12, and really be able to say at the end of that what are the things that are most important to them and why, instead of just listing hours and that type of thing. So those kind of conversations, I think, with other center directors are really gratifying, much less conferences like the Public Purpose Conference that's been held each spring, was in San Francisco last year, etc. So I'll stop there for the moment.
Well, thank you, Jim. Stacey, you've been waiting so patiently. So if
I've been listening. It's been great.
Okay, so if you can introduce the ACE Center to us, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Thanks. And the benefit of going last is the opportunity to piggyback on all the reference, all the things that other people have said, because I really do think sort of the ACE Center came out of a strategic plan, which I think we've heard from different people. This is, as I said, the 5th year. Castilleja has several centers, and so the question for our community was how did the centers intersect with the curriculum, and what is how do the arrows work? That's how I like to talk about it with teachers and with fellow administrators, which is sort of what are we driving in the school community and what are we also responding to? Just by way of context, the additional centers that we have are sort of a STEM engineering center called our Born Idea Lab, which has a makerspace in it, and a research center that has information science and research. And then we also have an E4 grant, and it's tied to the work I'm doing, so I'll share it, for it's called the Partnership for 21st Century Assessment, which really helps us think about the efficacy of all of this center-driven work and the programming we're doing. And, you know, are we meeting the mission of our school through the model that we're creating? And so to Jim's point, I think, you know, the clarity of the mission and which is in our case, graduating women leaders who affect change in the world. So it's a very sort of activist-oriented mission. The clarity of the mission and then the clarity of the role of the center in meeting that mission does help me make choices and help our school make choices when there's just a plethora of opportunities in which we can engage, in which our students are interested in engaging. So with that framing, I'll say that the reason this group is interesting to Castilleja is because part of the framework of the ACE Center is the notion of partnership and the idea that, you know, while we don't have a clarity of sort of these are the 3 topics we're going to work on in the city or whatever it is, our clarity is the idea that whatever we engage in as a community, we engage in partnership with another group, organization. Even internally, we can sort of leverage some of the concepts we're talking about, but we have local and we have global partners. And so it's with those partners that then we begin to help our students learn about how to lead effectively in collaboration with other people. And that's what's driving us. So let me just look at my little points here. So the decision to create the center initially coming out of the strategic plan was the notion that girls in particular, but you know, I really believe this, I think we all believe this for all of us in terms of education, learn best through experiences. And that the experiential learning piece is what we retain best and how we process our own development as thinkers, as opposed to usually sitting in a lecture, which doesn't mean that you don't need lecture sometimes to frame some of what you're going to do and share an idea, but the experiences are important, and in cultivating women leaders, giving them experiences where they take scaffolded risks is very important. So the ACE Center was conceived of initially as a library of experiences. And I think it's important, if people are thinking of starting centers, to think of this case study, because this is where all the challenges come up for us. A library of experiences, in the same way you check out a book, those are great one-off opportunities, but what we learned was that those don't necessarily inform classroom practice, and that question of who's driving what came up in the first year, because while I could create co-curricular experiences for students, and you know, so in the ACE Center we host lots of programs schools traditionally have that are co-curricular. Internship programs, often global travel programs, community engagement programs, or some places might call them service learning, but we don't talk about it that way here. Our mentoring programs, bridging programs where our students tutor kids in other communities and tutor them, and then in our notion of thinking about this, also learn from them. So that's the partnership piece and the philosophical piece that we're using to underpin any of the decisions we make around what programming we engage with. Our diversity and inclusion sort of intentionality, both for adults and for students, sort of got aggregated here. So then we have this center, and here are all these one-off programs that are sometimes used the term balkanized, which was great, siloed. How do they relate to each other, and then how do we create an experience for our students and our educators so that, and our families, so that all of this work makes sense, and our students realize it's all essential, the experience, the framing behind it, the reflection from it, in shaping them as leaders. So that was sort of let's take these buckets, put them in the A center, and think about the relationship that happens between them. So then the challenge became, okay, well, what do teachers need to do? What's their responsibility in preparing the students to have the knowledge and skills they need to leverage in these experiences? And then how do they leverage what the students learn through experiences when they come back? And are the two things separate, or are they together? And so I think the real challenge for anyone developing a center that doesn't, sort of really just focus on professional development, but also informs curriculum, is to have clarity for everyone around what the mandate is, of the center director in my case. I do have a staff, so we're a team that does a lot of things, but what's the reporting structure? Where does it fit in the org structure? Who's going to be evaluated for implementing the programs that you're trying to drive? Or on the flip side, how are faculty able to see these centers as a resource to make changes that they're hoping to make? And who drives the sort of philosophical or the pedagogical framing behind where the school's going from the faculty's point of view? And I think it's an organic process, but it doesn't have to be quite as organic as it was at Castilleja. And I think we've become very comfortable with airing the dirty laundry about that, and that it was a challenge, because if there's anything we have to offer by being sort of 2 years further down the road maybe than some of these other centers, it's that by the 4th and 5th year, where we've now got real clarity around how the negotiation works, we actually can be much more productive, much more quickly, and collaborate more effectively. And frankly, for a school thinking about training leaders, that's what we're trying to teach our students too, to be clear, to have a framework. Don't just start with, sort of piloting lots of things where people wonder how will it be measured or evaluated at the end. You want flexibility in that structure, but you also want an initial sense of clarity so people know what they're working towards. In terms of sort of maybe the positives that have, and there's so many positives. I brought up this partnership for 21st century assessment earlier because, as we start to think about how do we assess students for curiosity, for risk-taking, for initiative, for resilience. You can use whatever words you want, and schools prefer different terms for many of the same ideas that we share. At Castilleja, we've landed on this idea of graduating girls with initiative, agility, and purpose. And the agility piece is sort of that flexible mindset. As we think about that, then and assess for it, it's just become much more natural for all of us to begin to realize, you need experiences and ambiguity in students' daily lives, things they can't count on, to begin to assess for how they navigate through things that are unknown, right? How do you assess for curiosity if you don't ever ask what they're interested in or give them places to be curious? So I think, I think there's a lot of similarity between our center and Penn Charter Center in that way, which is it's about sort of focusing the kids on things that are in their wheelhouse, but have a lot of questions and have a lot of complexity and a lot of tensions. And then the challenge is also helping the teachers. The professional development piece is helping the educators feel comfortable with that ambiguity, and then give them tools to think about, well, how do I leverage it? How do I assess it? So, without turning over a bunch of rubrics, which I don't think would be useful at this moment, tell everybody that's what we're working on. And tied to that, I just want to mention, so we don't count hours anymore here at Castilleja. So students aren't required to do a certain number of community engagement hours. They are required to move through a portfolio of experiences, many of which there's voice and choice around. And what they're choosing in those moments is they're sort of, if you imagine a matrix with all of these leadership skills and competencies that some of the things we just mentioned, managing ambiguity, public speaking, whatever it is, taking calculated risks, problem solving through a various set of ways. They need to choose experiences or internships or projects in the classroom where they're naming, I'm working on this right now. I'm working on that right now. So that by the end of their 6 through 12 experience at Castilleja, they have a keen sense of how they've developed leadership through a lot of different experiences, but what it means is they can take with them the toolkit and try out a new global trip. You know, we don't train them to go to India. We train them to understand cultural relativism, and then they can use that in lots of different places. And so the partnership piece and the notion that partnership underpins that all is very important, because that's how everything we do, you know, you can't do it in a vacuum. So you need to practice your negotiation with somebody who's a stakeholder who actually cares what the outcome is. And this isn't a pretend sort of situation. So I think those, just in terms of launching this initiative, I'm just looking if there were, I think those are the main points I wanted to make. The importance of the org structure and the clarity of how things are going to happen, you know, meeting the mission of your school, that being sort of a driving force. And then the student voice and choice, if it's a center about students, sort of their feeling that there's flexibility and they're learning skills and competencies, not to care about one particular thing. And that sort of has been what we've learned has been effective.
Well, thank you, Stacey. This is fantastic. I've already spoken to all of you in the past about all of your centers, but I love hearing about them over and over again, and you learn something new every single time. And I've learned that I really don't look good on my web camera. But I'm super impressed with the fact that all of your schools have a commitment to this in your strategic plan. So I think that it's crucial, and I wanted to know how did, and speak up if you have an answer, how did it come to the table that this should be included in the strategic plan? Because I feel like that's new for schools. I feel like schools are just now starting to put public purpose or collaboration or community engagement in their missions, in their strategic plan. So who was the stakeholder who brought it to the table, and how was it received, and was it a struggle to get it in there, or was it just a general community acceptance that that's who your school is and that's what you guys are going to adopt? So I don't know if anybody has an answer or an opinion.
Well, I think it's interesting. So, you know, I'm sort of just learning the history of it, but what I love about the way that St. Mark's went about it was so it was very intentional, and it was like everyone else, you know, the strategic planning process had all stakeholders at the table, you know, and so, but what they're very aware of is that the core values are the same. So the core values are intellect, character, and leadership, right? So it's those don't change. That's been here 150 years for this institution. How we define those, and how we support students and how we support faculty to get students where each student needs to be, that's the thing that has changed. And so so I think that it just, you know, just like the definition of innovation that I like to you know, work around, that it's not all new stuff. It's not throw out everything and start fresh. It's let's build on, let's hone our vision around what the core of our school is, and then build on that for our vision for what the future of our students should be. Bless you.
Yeah, I would say this, Jim, and certainly in our case, the mission had a lot to do with it. And I don't think anybody went into the strategic planning retreat without knowing they'd come out with some kind of public purpose orientation, etc. But I think leadership, at least in our case, had a lot to do with it. We had a head who was here 35 years before our current head, and he fought and fought to make a schedule in which we can get out during the day in the high school and have hour and 20-minute blocks. So we'll take kids in every discipline out into the community 10 times in the course of a trimester doing different things. And it created a mindset among faculty that this is something we do as a school, that I should be looking for a way to incorporate this in my work. And then we have a head who feels even more strongly about this and told us to think big, and didn't want to just hear about the service learning, but wanted to go much bigger than that. And so administrators often don't get a lot of compliments in that regard, but that really made a difference in our case, and sort of keeps us going, I think.
Jim, I think that's true. Everyone I talk to, credits our head of school, so Dr. John Warren, and he said his ambition is that St. Mark's will be the best small boarding school in the country, period. And that's driving, it's sort of lifting everyone up as we're striving to meet all the goals of the strategic plan. So leadership, I agree, is key.
And I think with Betsy, change of leadership I'm speaking for you, Betsy, but you had a change of leadership, but since it was in your strategic plan, right, it really sort of helped you stay the course?
That's right. That's right. And we've always had a commitment to public purpose at our school, so this isn't anything that's new. The only thing that's different is the center's commitment to engaging with public school teachers as well, which we hadn't done before.
So you're just moving on. And what about Stacey? Was it always part of your school, or was that just was it just new 5 years ago?
No, I think no. Yes, it was always part of the school in the sense that we're a girls' school with the mission to graduate leaders, and so the idea that we needed to have programs in place where girls were experiencing situations where they were challenged in an extraordinary way to practice their leadership skills. I think that was, 100 years ago, very innovative on the part of the school. Excuse me. I think what shifted with the development of the centers was really this commitment to moving away from this commitment to shaping the personal identities of young women in ways that they continue to take ownership of their learning over time, which is why sort of we did away with the hours counting, because that was sort of a mixed bag. We didn't want students doing things because it was required. We wanted them doing them because we had fostered a mindset and shaped behavioral norms so that they realized they needed to engage they had a social responsibility to engage in the world in which they were going to affect change. So I think, that was a little bit of the shift, was moving from the sense of noblesse oblige that I think sometimes can permeate social purpose programs, with this sense of we have and we're going to help the have-nots, to this sense of we all have, we just have different things. And we really need to learn to respect and value that, and then redistribute sort of the things we have so that we build all of us up. And that, I think, is a newer framework for us.
I love that we all have. We just need to redistribute what we have. I'm writing it.
Yeah, I don't want to be naive about it. Like, I think I could imagine hearing me say this on the other end and say, yeah, and it's pretty horrible to live in an environment where you have very, very little access to certain kinds of resources or fresh food and vegetables. It's not, we're not naive about it, and we're not Pollyanna about it. But what we don't want to do is have our students graduate thinking, oh, they're so happy with so little about other people, when our students aren't suffering from some of the same sort of bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, food and shelter. Like many of our students, all of our students, as far as I know, have food and shelter. And so what we don't want them to be able to do is say, I need to be grateful. We don't want to graduate grateful people. We want to graduate young people who understand that the world is complex and they have a responsibility to engage with people whose lives are different and understand each other's stories. And it's not just about being grateful. It's like, what are you going to do about it? You can be grateful and be an activist, and that's sort of where we're going.
That's fantastic. I already told you if I moved to California, I'd send my daughter there. So
But if you want to send her to a boarding school, she can go to St. Mark's. You know, so like there's all.
So I have two more questions, and I'll open up now to you guys. I feel like I'm monopolizing the time. Do any of you have questions to one another about your centers, or about something you heard, or something you had interest in learning about, but I didn't put in those framing questions for you?
Could I ask Stacey again? I loved her phrase, what are we driving in the school? And then you had a second part to that. I know that's going back.
Yeah, like, well, I think I was talking about the arrow going both ways. So there's this idea of what are we driving and what are we supporting, or what are we, I don't know if that's the word I used, but I think I probably used a more exciting word at that moment. But, you know, it's really, for me, it's just this visual of I have an agenda that's mandated by, you know, our head of school in terms, and we have a dean of, so it's helpful, I think, to know the org structure. We have a dean of teaching and learning, we have an upper school head, and we have a middle school head. So that we have these two division heads who really manage sort of student life in many ways, although they're deans who report to them. But they sort of look at that, and program in coordination with the Dean of Teaching and Learning, who oversees professional development and programs. So it's like a triumvirate of curriculum. And then the center directors report to the Dean of Teaching and Learning, not to the division heads. And so that said, I run a lot of autonomous programs. And so, you know, we're all very respectful of each other and check in, and you can imagine the number of meetings that affords us the opportunity to have. And so it's taken a few years to sort of figure out who checks in about what, who oversees what I report to the Dean of Teaching and Learning, but this is a student issue about a placement on a global trip. So who's driving some of these things? And then if teachers are developing curriculum and they are brainstorming with me and they're reporting to their department heads about that, you know, then where's the oversight? So, or lack of oversight, and maybe that's just fine. So I think sort of that question about who's driving what, who's ultimately accountable for different pieces, has taken us a few years to have clarity.
Stacey, I have a follow-up question too for you. I liked how you were talking about, in a way, I think the way I'm interpreting it is scaling up. So you might have initiatives where young women are out in the field doing some things, you know, and then they come back to their courses that might have been same old, same old. So how do you get the innovative experiences and practices that students are going through to impact teaching and learning back at school, right? So I guess one of the questions I have, and that's something that we're, you know, it's the notion of scalability. How do you get move from pockets of innovation to sharing innovative practices to transforming all practices, right? So how have you managed that?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a dance, and I think, as we all know, all of us working in schools, these things are negotiations, conversations, dances. In the sense that sometimes it's about making sure that that the right teachers are on the experiences with students, right? This partnership, and then some of it is about when they get back, you know, so making the time for the debrief, for the outcome goal setting, really being available to the teacher to say, you know, this is what these students have done. Do you want to brainstorm how to leverage it? I mean, a little bit. And I think it's very hard for a school to do what we're doing without the dedicated staffing in place, because you can be a classroom teacher and have time to do, you know, I know what's going on in just about every classroom at our school. Like, I know the overall curriculum, so it's very helpful that I've been a classroom teacher and that I understand, like, that piece of it. And so I make the connections, and I can say they're doing this in history and this, you know, in math, and wouldn't this be an interesting integrated project, and can you come and meet with me to talk about, but here are all the different parts. Like, we have, you know, we have an innovation fund that can stipend teachers for doing that kind of work, right? So, and then we have goals put forward by this by our Dean of Teaching and Learning and division heads around what the programmatic shifts are. And so teachers, then I know strategically who to talk to about things and how we can remunerate them if to put in that time. You can't do this with a wand and just...
I found the same thing with what I was trying to do. And 2 summers ago, I created some grants that teachers could apply with 21st century initiatives. And one was on the flipped classroom, one was on formative assessment, one was on classroom design of the 21st century, one was on creating a makerspace. And teachers applied for these grants, and they part of the stipulation to the grant was that they would act as mentors to other teachers, and that they would present their findings to a wider group, and then those people who had an interest in a particular grant would seek that person out. And that is kind of a grassroots way of spreading knowledge. And again, it's choice. It's nothing that was required. It was teachers that were interested in it. And so we ended up creating a makerspace out of that grant. And it was a total low budget, grassroots, if you make it, they will come kind of thing. And when we did it, there were 3 teachers and I who created this. In the fall, we invited different divisions to come in, faculty meetings, and we had an activity. We had handouts to talk about the importance of maker education and educating the teachers. And then part of that meeting at the end, after we did the activity, was for teachers to brainstorm how would they bring the maker idea into their own practice. And then we share those ideas. So that was just kind of a grassroots.
But I think what you mentioned, Betsy, that I really like and has worked here also is sort of create, people are proud of what they're doing, and the communications piece and highlighting it and honoring it without making anybody honoring the early adopters without sort of undermining people who are slowly adopting is like a beautiful process and an important one. So, as we staff the ACE Center, my one skill I do not have is to create, I'm not a good graphics person. I have wonderful images in my mind, but I couldn't make them happen. And so hiring someone who amongst other things had a great visual sense and the ability to do that and create lovely pop-ups which highlighted people's work, or make incredible boards on campus that highlighted some of the things people were doing. You can't overestimate the importance of communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I did, my previous job, was what I realized is, in the school we talk a lot about changing practices of teaching and learning, but maybe it isn't communicated as effectively to our broader communities. And I came from a public school background. So I just started a blog, and I would either invite teachers to post on the blog, or I would go or sometimes it was because I had been collaborating with teachers on something we were doing anyway. And so I would just write learning stories. And students loved them because they loved to see themselves and pictures. Teachers loved them because it was sort of evidence of their practice, and they were proud of it. Parents just absolutely loved it. Sometimes other educators would get in touch. So I definitely, starting a blog, sharing stories out using social media is great too.
Yeah. My phones are ringing off the hook because I have a 1 o'clock meeting.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Oh yeah, it's 4 for you guys. I'm sorry.
We're at the end of our day.
I'm sorry. And I have so many questions I want to ask you all. So I hope can I thank you, Blake? I'm so embarrassed to have to do this, but it's sort of...
my gosh, you're fine. I'm so grateful you were here and you're a part of it, and we got to hear from you. And if we need to, we can do it again, and we can all collaborate again. So thank you, Stacey. Go ahead and take your call. And
thanks, Stacey.
We're all going to go to the pool in about an hour. So
thank you all. I learned a lot hearing from everyone. Nice to meet you all.
Nice
Thanks,
to see you.
Stacey. Bye.
Bye.
I didn't realize the time was sort of getting away from me because I was really enjoying listening to you. So, do you guys have any more questions or anything else you guys want to say, or how about this? Imagine I am an employee at a school, and I'm thinking I want to propose this to my head of school, that this sort of center is the way we should go. What is like the one piece of advice that you would say, gosh, I wish I had known this when we'd started, or even when I started my job? Give me one piece of advice that I can really hang on to.
I think it's really important when you are creating something like this to make sure everybody understands what the purpose of it is, to be clear about how it fits into the school, how the leadership team works with it, and how communicate to the teachers what its purpose is. And that's what I think, if I were to do anything differently, we would do that a little bit better. But I think it's really important because it's a relatively new concept to most teachers, and it's important for them to understand the benefit to them. And then once it's underway, they will see that benefit as they take part in the programs. But just rolling it out, it's really important.
Great.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. Our lower school teachers have probably had a lot more buy-in than our middle or high school teachers, just because they have that flexibility with their curriculum, and we have some great leaders down there that we try to celebrate as well. I'd also add that in a strange way, people in admissions have been very responsive to this. I was up giving speeches in the first year, just sort of dry speeches to gatherings, and now they're using me a lot more, and there is a cohort of people here at the school that seem to understand that parents are responding to this. And when you talk about I was a college counselor for 25 years, and you can talk forever about whether little Johnny will get and Susie will get in Stanford or Colgate or whatever, but when you start talking about bigger goals here, and that we're all in this together in the city of Philadelphia, and we can't have this kind of system sustain itself for 15 years from now, our potential constituency and parents really respond. And so I think there's an awareness of that around the school too, which I never imagined in the beginning years when we first set this up.
Yeah, I agree with Betsy. For me, it's very clear. The purpose was very clear. So purpose and goals, but also, and I definitely have it match, somehow be really an essential part of the mission and vision of the school. But at the same time, you have to think on a practical level. As someone new coming into a school, it's great. I told the academic dean who I report to that I really have to start, practicing my elevator speech for people when I talk to parents and things like that, because it's a huge endeavor. How do I boil that down into something concrete? But at the same time, I'm also working my day-to-day, my daily practice is made with teachers. And their perspective is, what value do you add for me? What are you going to do for me? And so it's great to have a beautiful vision and mission, but also what's that practical piece? What does it look like on the ground? And that's what is going to get, I think, buy-in, because that's the real stuff.
That's great. Jim, I've been saying I've been at NNSP for 2 years now, but I've been saying that schools don't recognize what a marketing value this work is. And so it's true when you say that your admissions people have started to sort of sell their school talking about the Center for Public Purpose, that there's an unintentional marketing value of the good work you're doing, because everybody's valuing it, and they want this for their children.
Yeah, I find you've got to, as everybody said, you've got to constantly inform people, constituencies around the school, about what you're doing and what's happening. Never assume that people are just going to know and it just pops up on the radar. They don't know, and you've got to constantly tell them that.
I know, and it's not in your nature, right? That it's not the Quakers' nature to shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, it's after 4, and I'm going to let you guys go. I am so incredibly grateful for your time and for your participation, and I hope we can do this again. We've had about 15 viewers going on the whole time who've been watching us. So I don't know if you guys can see that on your screens, but I've been watching it. Now they're all clicking off. But anyway, thank you guys so much for your time and for your preparation and your effort, and it has been a pleasure to hear about all your centers and to talk with you. So I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Thank you, Blake.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody.
I will talk to you all soon.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.